the problem in youth ministry often is that it's like, okay, who's going to handle these kids? Okay, could we scrape together enough money to pay somebody 20 hours to be in charge of their spiritual formation? And then you bring them in and you pay them a part-time salary, and everybody kind of goes, awesome, you're in charge of them. And then what do you know, that person burns out, or they can't live off 20 hours a week or whatever, and they leave. And so there's this sort of rotating thing. This is a longer conversation, but you're trying to create an ecology of relationships. So as a youth minister, for example, I remember getting a job, and it was part-time youth working job. And I said, I will take this job if you will give me 8 adults who will commit to this ministry for 3 years. And when the first day of employment started, I showed up and said, okay, where's the 8 adults? And they said, oh, we haven't got that yet. We thought maybe you could find them. And so I said, okay. And I did not do, I just left the church and said, I'm not doing this job until you have 8 adults. Now that was a aggressive way of doing it. But part of the work of a youth minister is actually to create, to recruit adults and create a community of adults who are willing to pray, to listen, to discern the Spirit of God, and to spend time with the young people. And so that's the number one, well, the number one thing is you spending time listening to God. And number 2 would be having a community. Jesus is not a lone ranger. He doesn't go out on his own. The first thing he does is he gathers a community. And so in these church settings, we need to gather that community, knowing that that community will be in touch with that young person far longer than I will, especially if I'm a transplant to that church or I come from someplace else. I have to find ways to build relationships between the adults and the young people. And there's strategies to do that, and that's a longer conversation. But my dad was a youth ministry writer and a youth ministry teacher and all that stuff. I never was in a youth group. I was in a church, and I dreaded going to church like any kid. I didn't like going, but there was Stu Higgs and 3 or 4 other adults who genuinely liked me when I was unlikable, and would spend time listening to me in that church. And even after my dad hired a youth minister at our church, and that person left, another person left, I was come back in college, I'd come back in young adulthood, and those adults in the church were always steady, present, and curious about me. They liked me. They wanted to hear about my life. They wrote me letters, and those were the relationships that were transformative.
Thanks.
Yeah. I mean, we're just touching on a lot of things, and hopefully there's one thing in this little 90-minute thing that you can take with you. And it might be that you need more time to listen. It might be you need to get together with a couple of parents or a couple of people from the church where you have coffee, you talk about the kids, you listen. Well, what can we really do? What's possible? How do we create spaces where the longings and the deeper self of these young people, that image of God, can be revealed or expanded or known? Maybe the calling is, with the kids you have, you need to create little spaces of quiet and listening where they can be religious interpreters, where they can pursue God directly, not just mediated through you. And you can give them tools and skills to pursue that, knowing you're only going to be there a short time. Maybe that's some of the things.